I believe this is where we left off yesterday. All right, so the next, we already did that. All right, so there are three types of PPCs. Whoever I swiped this from made some typos here, but we're not going to worry about that too much. I want you to draw this here on your paper, the three different types. So if there's a bowed out line, that represents increasing opportunity costs, which means the more, in that case of guns and butter, the more butter you want, the more guns you're giving up. In my first year teaching, I tried to explain the difference between the first two to the kids, and I said, I don't really know why that means, why it bows out instead of as a straight line. And I had all these the whole class pretty much was in BC Cal. And I said, how many of you can look at this and understand it? The entire class raised their hand. The only person who didn't really see it, if you know what I mean by see, some of you are very, very good at math. And you see graphs in your head. I know that seems a little bit odd, but you kind of do. You're just good at this kind of stuff. And if you're like that, then you automatically get this. If you don't, if you're not that good at math or it's not intuitive to you, I'm good with percentages and stuff like that because of my background as an accountant, but not so much graphing. But anyway, the first one, increasing opportunity cost, that means every time you get more butter, you give up more guns. Now, for the middle one, constant opportunity cost, it's a straight line, which means the ratio is always the same. If every time you get 1 more pound of butter, you give up 2 guns, that relationship will stay the same. If it's bowed inward, like the third one, that means decreasing opportunity cost. The more butter you get, the less guns you give up. And I hope I did that right. If not, I'm sure one of you really good math geeks will tell me, or I'll call my good friend Miss Anderson up. All right, moving on here. All right, shifting the production possibilities curve. I will tell you, when you take government, and if you've got friends in government, you probably have already heard this. Government is very much a high vocabulary class. Economics is not. Economics is more understanding how things work. Understanding how things work. So there's not that much vocabulary, but one word you're clearly going to see a lot in this course is the word shifting or shifters. And we're going to be talking about curves and what makes them shift. And so all it means is there's not a lot of hardcore math in this class. It's easy math. What they want you to realize is if somebody makes an economic statement, you automatically can understand basically what that would do to the economy. Like if someone comes along and says, hey, let's outlaw the use of oil, or let's ban the drilling of oil, or let's quit using gasoline or oil. Now, we're not talking about long term, we're talking about short term. Everything you buy, pretty much, unless you buy it, you download it digitally over the internet, is affected by the price of oil. If you go get a Whopper at Burger King, it came to that Burger King in the back of the truck, which runs on an oil-based product. If you buy a shirt down at Ross Dress for Less, it is affected by the price of oil. So you just understand, I'm not saying that the environment's not important and that global warming, I'm not saying any of those things like that. But you just understand, it's just intuitive. If we just ban the use of oil, everything is going to become more expensive. As everything becomes more expensive or either impossible to get, unemployment is going to go up. So that's what we're talking about here. You just understand this intuitively. That is the goal of the AP economics class. And I've said this probably 2 or 3 times already. This is a political class. It is about politics. You wouldn't think it would be, but it is. And we're very, very lucky to have an election year. And I'm going to do as best I can to stay out of trouble. That may not happen. All right. Production possibilities. Let's see here. We're not going to write these down. We already wrote them down in the notes. But we're going to have to talk about the shifters. And here's what a shifter is. What would make that curve go all the way out to the right or drop inward to the left? And this is Friday, and we had essays today, and they were easy, I hope. But We don't have a whole lot of time today to go in detail. So sometime next week, I don't know how we're going to do group work or cooperative learning in this class. I haven't figured that out yet, but I need to do more scenarios. We're just going to do a few today and go on. Here's the three shifters of the PPC. Number one, a change in resource quantity or quality. Well, there's the oil one right there. If all of a sudden, I don't know, Alaska blew up. That's where we get a lot of our oil now. If all of a sudden Alaska and North Dakota disappeared from the face of the earth, what would happen to the PPF, the PPC? Well, that's where we get a lot of our oil. So if that oil disappeared, either our factories would not work at all because, they couldn't get any supplies, from the back of a truck. I mean, it'd have a drastic effect on this economy. What would happen is the economy, it would not be possible to produce as much as we had produced in the past. So the entire curve would drop inward. We wouldn't be operating at a point inside the curve like you did on your essay today. We're not talking about an inefficient place. We're talking about if we don't have the oil, it would be impossible. The entire curve would shift in. What happened if half the population died? That would not be a point inside the curve. The entire curve would drop inward. Hope that makes sense. If all of a sudden if oil became, I don't know, I got to get off oil. I always use dumb examples like, what if they invented a milkshake that would allow us to survive and do well on only 2 hours of sleep a night? Well, what happened? The entire PPF and PPC would jump outward because we would be capable of making more things. What would happen if the speed of our computers multiplied tenfold? That would cause the PPC to jump outward. We would be able to get more work done. Okay, I'm beating a dead horse here. All right. Change in technology. Well, there's the speed of the computers there. By the way, a lot of AP macro teachers make their kids memorize the shifters. We're going to talk about a lot of shifters in this course. I do not. I'm rather unusual in that respect. I explain to you what they are, and then I give you a whole bunch of scenarios and hope you understand it. I mean, hopefully it'll eventually be intuitive to you. If they invented a milkshake that meant we could get less sleep at night, our country would get a lot more work done. That's the theory anyway. What happens if a virus hit the United States and all of a sudden we required 18 hours of sleep every night? Well, the entire PPC, that's not really a technology thing. That's a resource quality because workers are resources. It would drop inward. The third one is change in trade. And what that means is, I'm going to just actually kind of gloss over this. When we get to absolute and comparative advantage, we will talk about a change in trade. Just, if you can get things from a country that can make things cheaper, we're just going to leave it alone and move on here. That gets rather complicated. Okay. So now I don't want you to write all these down. You just pay attention here. What happens if there's an increase in population? And your country makes two things. It makes robots and pizzas. The whole thing shifts outward. Now, I do want to talk about politics in here. And I'm pretty conservative. You probably already figured that out already. But that won't stop me from trying to give you both sides of the argument. For those of you who want more immigrants to this country, there's your argument right there. That is a perfectly good economic argument. Now, there are also economic arguments against it, but that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about just alone. If we had more population in this country, we would have more workers. We would be capable of producing more. And on the same hand, if we have less workers, we could produce less. Now, one thing you're going to learn about economics does not measure quality of life. We're going to talk about GDP in the next couple of weeks. GDP is the amount of stuff we make in this country. It does not measure how happy we are. For all those years I taught next door to Mr. Mellon, I'd always say, okay, this class measures how well the economy is doing. It does not measure quality of life and whether or not you're happy or depressed. For that, you need to go next door to AP Psychology. Economics does not answer those questions. It was not designed to. All right, moving on. What's the scenario here? What if there's a technology improvement in pizza ovens? This one you might want to write down. Okay? The whole curve is not going to shift out. Everything's going to stay the same for robots, but the number of pizzas being made is going to go up. So again, if you want to draw that one, fine. Before I throw a big test on the PPC on you, we will spend more time reviewing. And I talked about this briefly the other day. What if you have two countries? And the title of this is, and again, you don't have to write these. You don't have to write any of these unless you want to. I referred to this the other day. So you got Panama and Mexico. If Panama favors making more consumer goods and Mexico favors making more capital goods, which one will do the best in the future? And hopefully you get that it will be Mexico. Now, Mexico will greatly surplus. Once again, it's a late Thursday night. It will greatly surpass Panama in the future. But what's the problem? Well, people like consumer goods and not capital goods. I mean, you can't eat a tractor, I guess, unless you're really hungry. You can't eat a bulldozer. So the deal is, in this case, the Mexicans would be a lot less happy. Now, in the future, they might be happier. But it's just like you guys are going to be in college next year, at least we hope. And I can tell you, you're going to hear some stories about finals week. I don't know if you ever heard those two words put together, where I had one of my students, pretty good AP student, who posted on Facebook. She said, I haven't slept in 3 days. Well, welcome to finals week. I'm always amazed by kids who get senioritis and blow off half their exams. Then, a year later, you find out they've dropped out of college. I've had that happen to, a lot of my students. But anyway, I mean, I'm hoping it doesn't happen to you. But you'll hear about finals week. And so the deal is, when you're going through finals week and you got 5 finals in 3 days, and your bright futures, your scholarship, they don't believe in retakes, of course. So if you mention that to a college professor, you're probably going to get a pretty interesting laugh out of them. But the deal is, you've got a lot riding on this. But what you have to do is say, okay, I'm suffering now, but in, 5 years from now, I'll have a college degree, and I'll be making more money. And so that's the thing. It's the same principle here. You are suffering now to benefit later. What do the weightlifters say? No pain, no gain. All right, next topic. And again, we're not done with PPFs and PPCs. I'm still new at this, trying to teach this way. And hopefully next Friday, we'll all be in the classroom, or most of us together. We will do some group work. I don't know how we're going to do it, where I give you like 10 or 15 scenarios. And you have to figure out what happens to the PPF. I like to do that, especially before a test. I'll give you 10 to 15 of them. And what I like you to do is come up with the answers on your own, and then check with your buddies. And that's my rule on homework, by the way. I don't consider that cheating. You should do your own homework, and then you should call your buddies up and check your answers. Because usually the day the homework's due is the day the test is. And so, I want you coming in prepared. Homework is supposed to get you ready. Anyway, let's cover the major economic systems. Okay, 3 types of economic systems. And I'm going to spend about 15 or 20 minutes on this, and then we probably won't talk about it again until December, while we're getting ready for your final exam. But there's 3 types. Now, this lecture I borrowed from a friend of mine. He gave it to me. Pretty interesting guy. He was the teacher down in Olympia. He was the lead for all the Orange County econ teachers. And his wife is, I believe, a veterinarian. And she makes way more money than he does. And so his kids got offered scholarships to Lake Highland Prep. They could go for free if their dad would come teach over there. So we love this guy, a really funny guy. And so he bailed on OCPS, and so he could get his kids. I don't know that they went for free, but they certainly saved a lot of money. But he gave me tons of his stuff, and this is where I got that lecture. And I probably wouldn't have used some of the words he did, but here we go. All right, first type, centrally planned economy. This is what you would call, now they're not going to use the word socialist on the AP exam. It's too politically charged, especially right now. In this election we're going on here, this word socialist. The lady who wrote your textbook, her name is Ray. So if you ever look at the digital copy of your textbook, it's called Krugman's Economics, but Krugman didn't actually write it. Ray wrote the thing, and she was the one that trained me. And when I went to training with her, somebody asked her, said, "Isn't this socialist?" And she said, "I don't let my students use that word." Now, she's a college professor. She's got a PhD in economics. She goes, "If a kid says the word socialist in my room, I say, stand up and explain it." And she goes, "And they can't, so I'll tell them to explain it or get out." Now, I think she was probably kidding, but I don't know. She was kind of tough. And I was sitting there thinking, listen, lady, I didn't say this. I was thinking this. I know what socialism is, but I wasn't going to stand up and take on a PhD in economics. There are times in your life when it's best to sit down and shut up. So I didn't say anything. But she said we should stay away from that word. And she's probably right, because they won't use it on the AP macro exam. They'll use command. I'm going to throw the word socialist in just because I know a lot of you are fascinated with that. It's like become trendy amongst, Generation Z. And so I want you to know that's really what we're talking about here. Okay, so centrally planned command economy. And what that means is, and the best example of this is Stalin's Soviet Union. And every so often I have somebody who wants to argue with me and tell me that the Soviet Union was a communist country. Yes, we call it that. But the name of the country was the USSR, and it stands for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. It was a socialist country. It was run by the Communist Party. We call it Communist China, but it is Socialist China, or at least it was. So anyway, if you want to have that argument with me, you should have taken AP European. All right, so this is a command economy, and I'm going to use Stalin as an example. And I mentioned him in my lecture yesterday. Stalin took over Russia, and it was a backward country. Huge country, tremendous natural resources, backward. And he goes, we're going to industrialize. We're going to catch up with the West. And he had these 5-year plans, and I referred to this yesterday. He had a goal, and here's what it means by command or central planning. These guys sit down in a room, girls too, they sit down in a room, male and female, and they say, here's what we want the economy to do. And they plan it all out, and the individual marketplace has no voice in the decision. So what Stalin did his first 5 years, he's like, we're going to build railroads, we're going to build dams, we're going to build irrigation, we're going to build factories, we're going to bring electricity to Siberia. And again, as you heard me say yesterday, they lost through this process somewhere around 20 million people. I always heard 10 million for years. I believe that was, I don't know what number they say now, whether it was 10 or 20. And, at this point, I don't know that they can even count that high. So we can say 10 or 20 doesn't matter. But it was spectacularly successful. But it was planned out. So that's what this means. It is a planned economy. Then the other end of the extreme is called a free market economy. That's what we call capitalism. Again, they will probably not use that word on the exam. They might, because the U.S. economic system has always been a capitalistic system. And this book, it's interesting. Krugman, the man who wrote the book, is a pretty liberal economist. He's pretty, if you know about left and right, he's pretty far on the left. You can go Google him. I'm kind of surprised. I actually asked her about this. I said, are there certain places that will not buy this book because his name is on the cover? And the author basically said yes. So, but anyway, the book is about the American economic system, which is largely capitalistic. It's a free market economy. And then there's the third type, which is the mixed economy. And the mixed economy has elements of both. And we have a number 3. I know it seems like I'm contradicting myself. We have a mixed economy. That's what we have. There are really no 100% free market economies in the world. You pretty much you'd have to go to a deserted island where there's no government and have, maybe 10 people, and then you'd have a free market economy. We have a mixed economy, but ours is heavily tilted towards free market. And whereas Norway now, those of you fascinated with democratic socialism, whichever word is the flavor of the day, you hear Bernie Sanders talk about Denmark a lot. The country you really should be focusing on is Norway. But Norway really is it's a mixed economy, and it's got huge elements of capitalism. Anyway, moving on. All right. So the guy who wrote this lecture, the teacher I was talking about, he left this in here, and we're just going to go through this. And I don't want you to write all this down. I just want you to listen, and we'll go through it. The government, I do want you to write these top 3 things down. In a centrally planned economy, Again, if I had written this lecture, I wouldn't have put the word communism, but he did. I would have used the word socialism, but that's the important thing. They own all the resources. Okay? One of my favorite scenes is a movie called Dr. Zhivago. One of my favorite scenes, Dr. Zhivago, is about this doctor in World War One. He's Russian. He goes off to fight at the front, and when he comes back home after like 4 years of the war, he didn't fight. He was a doctor, but he was sawing off arms and legs the whole time. When he came back from the war, now it's a movie, but the guy who wrote it was there during the Russian Revolution. Well, the socialists, the Bolsheviks, had taken over, and their 3-story mansion, they've moved like 10 families in there. It's just, to me, it's just a hilarious scene in the movie. Hilarious if you have a very sick sense of humor. He comes in, there's all these people living in his house because it's no longer his house. He's not allowed to. And the commissar that's running his house, she basically yells at him. She goes, "How dare you have this nice house? This house, you could keep 10 or 15 families in this house. Shame on you." And so in a fully planned command economy, the government owns all the resources. So I know people from Sweden. For some reason, I don't know anybody from Norway or Denmark, but I know a whole bunch of Swedes. Captain of my water polo team, valedictorian a few years ago from Sweden. He'd wear a Swedish, his Speedo he wore had a Swedish flag on it. We used to like to make fun of him. But I know a lot of Swedes, and they do have private property there. So I want you to write this one down too. A centrally planned economy. They decide what to produce, how much to produce, and who's going to get it. Okay. And here's the main countries. You don't really need to write them down. I put China question mark because China is very, very interesting. China was a socialist country, and then along came this guy named Deng Xiaoping, and he experimented with free markets and capitalism. And so China is a very interesting country. I should know more about it. It has elements of both hardcore socialism and hardcore capitalism. I really can't explain it. All right. So anyway, you don't need to write this. The big issue with these countries is there's not much incentive to work. All right. You don't need to write these down. Now, here's the good deal. He got the word communism here. There's low unemployment. In these countries, if the government is your employer, everyone's going to have a job. You got great job security. Government's not going to go out of business. There's not going to be unemployment. And so now this is what he wrote. I would not agree with this statement. But if you keep incomes fairly equal, you're not going to have anybody extremely poor. I disagree with that. What you're not going to have is a whole lot of wealth inequality. I am fascinated, obviously, if you saw my bio video, I was born in Miami. I'm fascinated with Cuba. And I finally met some Cubans. I had 2 girls last year in class from Cuba. Very interesting discussion they had with the American-born Cubans about socialism. I wish I had recorded it, but they don't make the same down there. There's not a whole lot of disparity in the income. There's free health care. The bad thing about this, no incentive to work harder, which I don't really think is true. I think there's some incentive. I mean, the Russians clearly have, and the Chinese have come up with, so number 2 I kind of disagree with as well, which is probably, you're wondering, why are you using this lecture? Well, I just wanted you to hear these ideas. And the theory is that if there's not much competition, it will keep the quality of goods poor. In AP European, I like to show the East German Trabant, or the Trabi, which was the car that the East Germans made. And when the Berlin Wall fell, the East Germans tried to escape from East Germany into West Germany. East Germany, we're going to see some pictures here in a minute, heavily socialized command economy. And then West Germany was just like us, hugely capitalistic. And these families crammed into these Trabants. Their top speed was about 35 miles an hour. And they went through this circuitous route. They couldn't leave. And East Germany would not allow them to go to West Germany. So as I recall, they went to they got permission to go to Czechoslovakia on vacation. Then they drove across the border into Austria, then into West Germany, and wound up on this thing called the Autobahn. Well, once they got in the capitalist country, they have more than one type of car. They have Mercedes. What else they got? Is Porsche German? I don't even know. Volkswagen. BMW, they got over there, and it's hilarious. There's no speed limit on the Autobahn. These cars come along doing 95 miles an hour, and these Trabants from East Germany were doing 35 miles an hour because in that country, the government decided what kind of cars to make. All right, and they're not all corrupt leaders. And there's, according to the guy who wrote this, there's few individual freedoms. Well, it depends on the country. All right, so the free market system, I want my lecture to be about 40 minutes. So let's write a couple of these things down. It's laissez-faire, which means pretty much let it be. So if you decide here in Apopka that you want to open up a factory to make pink umbrellas, you can probably do that. Now, if you're running a factory in the middle of a neighborhood, especially one of these ones with a gate on the front and a security guard, they're probably not going to, in rules and this thing called, here we go, a homeowners association, you're probably not going to be allowed to do away with that, to get away with that. But for the most part, if you go into the right area and you follow some rules, you'll be able to open that. In a command economy, that would not be allowed. The individuals own the resources and answer the three economic questions: what to produce, who to produce it, and who to get it. And there's a profit incentive. I'm spending too much time on this. Wide variety of goods. And then here's the theory. Competition and self-interest will work together to regulate the economy. All right, I do want you to write this down, the invisible hand. And this is the idea of a guy named Adam Smith. And this idea is that if you let people go out and do what they feel is right for them economically, it will answer society's needs. Now, that is his idea, the idea of the invisible hand. And we're going to talk about the law of demand next week. I can hear some of my friends laughing at this statement. Even I don't 100% agree with this statement. But, all right, we're going to just get through this. Anyway, that competition and self-interest act as an invisible hand. For instance, we're going to find here in a minute that one of the arguments against capitalism is that it puts the needs of the company over the needs of the individual. That is true. By the way, my wife brought supper home tonight, and she brought us those Popeyes chicken sandwiches. Have you had one of those? They're pretty dang good. And so here's the deal. Whoever owns Popeyes, the stockholders, they want to make money, right? Well, if the sandwich is not good, is anybody going to buy it? No. They're going to drive, what's next door? KFC. I'm a big fan of their chicken sandwiches. I always loved Wendy's chicken sandwiches, but then I discovered KFC chicken sandwiches, and now we've got this, and of course we got Zaxby's. Although last time I drove by, nobody was there. So here's the deal about this. If Popeyes does not make a sandwich that consumers want to buy, they're going to go out of business. So it is in their self-interest to make their customers happy. And that is the capitalist argument. All right, here's the negatives. Wealth inequality, beyond the shadow of a doubt. There's going to be huge wealth inequality. Tremendous. Mario Cuomo, is that his name? Or is that the father's name? The governor of New York recently said that 1% of New Yorkers pay 50% of all the taxes up there. And he said something pretty interesting. He basically said, we need to make sure we don't drive these people away. Think about that. 1% of the population is paying 50% of the taxes. That means these guys are super, super rich. And they're paying lots of taxes. And so if New York raises their taxes, they're going to scoot over, I don't know what's next door up there, Connecticut, New Jersey. They're going to do like the president has done. He's from Queens. They're going to go to Florida. And so the deal is, my point is, the reason they're paying so much taxes is because they make so much money. And there's so many people up there that can barely get by. That's wealth inequality. And it creates an economy built on consumption, which can be bad for the environment, places the needs of the company over that of the individual. Unproductive people can be left behind. And here's the deal about unregulated capitalism. Once you have a monopoly, that's where there's only one company, they can charge whatever they want, which is basically what socialism does. The government has the monopoly. And so if you let one company win, it can lead to bad things. That's unregulated capitalism. All right, moving on. I love this picture. So to me, this is the very definition of a free market economy right here. Do you remember when you were a kid and your mom said, go over to the cereal aisle and get a box of cereal? Can you imagine seeing this To this day, when I'm in Winn-Dixie and I go in the cereal aisle, I just stand there and I am 58 and I'm amazed. When I was a kid, we had this stuff called Captain Crunch. I know, we still do. I hear some of you answering right now. And then they came up with this thing called Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries. Well, apparently now they actually have entire boxes of just Crunch Berries. And then there's Peanut Butter Captain Crunch. This is the sign of a market system. If you were in a fully command economy, the government, in most cases, would not allow this. They would say, this is a ridiculous waste of resources. Why should we have 80 different types of cereal? It's a waste of resources. People in free market systems say, that's because we want this stuff. And if we don't buy it, they'll quit making it. So to me, this is always, I remember as a kid, Mom would send me to go get something, and I would just be stunned to look at this. To this day, I don't know, there's plenty of other sections in the supermarket. This is the one that shocks me because it usually goes an entire length of one aisle. The Sweatshop idea, I want to finish this up because I think I've gone a little bit too long on this. I'm sure you're all agreeing. Hopefully you're still awake here with me. All right, so here is now, again, the guy's got communism, capitalism here. But this is, I'm going to give you two examples here of two countries that are genetically the same. The people have the same genetics that were split in the Cold War. And that is the same city block in East Germany in 1991 and 2003 under a free market system. Same block now. Now let's look up here. Let's talk about the good and the bad. In 1991, the government owned the building. And you didn't get to choose where to live. The government told you where to live. So if they wanted you to live in that apartment building, third floor, you lived in that apartment building, third floor. Okay? And so the thing is, now here's the thing. You had a place to stay. Even if you were out of work, which is unlikely to happen, you had a place to stay. You know, you had free health care. Okay, so let's just be honest here. You had that. On the other hand, the government is not going to spend a whole lot of time sprucing it up and painting it or anything like that because they don't need to, because the people don't have a choice. You know, fast forward here years later, now the government has probably sold it to an individual, and this individual wants to make a profit, and there's other places to stay out there. So they have painted it, they've planted some trees, they've made it look all nice and pretty. They probably have a coffee shop here. I mean, they are Germans, if you know anything about German coffee houses. Anyway, they put a lot in here. Of course, in this country, the landlord is probably getting richer and richer and richer, and there's probably people who can't afford to live here, or people are going to get thrown out because they've lost their job. So there's pros and cons of both. But that is the same block, the same genetics, and so a comparison of the two systems. And here's the other one. Now, of course, I love talking about this in my European history classes. Basically, what West Germany did was when socialism failed in Eastern Europe and all across Eastern Europe, every one of those countries became a free market. Every single one. There was like 13 of them. I don't know the exact number. Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, Russia, Poland. When they did that, what East Germany did was West Germany bought them. Basically, West Germany said, brothers, we want you back. And West Germany basically took their money, I don't know how to explain this economically, and gave it to the East Germans and reunified, because for 40 or 50 years they've been separated. And this is North and South Korea after dark. And you'll see this, and so here's South Korea, where they make Daewoo and Hyundai, Samsung, Hitachi. I hope all those are Korean, and I didn't throw a couple of Japanese names in there. I may have. And that is North Korea. When Obama was president, North Korea angered us. They launched a cyber attack at us, and something strange happened. All the internet went out in North Korea, and it's hilarious. I need to find the video. They asked President Obama about it. They said, was the United States behind this? And he denied it, but come on. I mean, we knocked their internet out, all 7 people with internet. So the deal is, you can see the deal there. The average North Korean male is 3 inches shorter than the South Korean male. That is in your economics textbook way back near the back in one of those chapters. I think maybe we spent too much time on this. These are the 3 economic systems. I just want you to remember that We have a mixed capitalist system, so when your conservative Republican buddies start bragging about our capitalistic system, we have strong restrictions. There's certain businesses you can't open that are heavily regulated. So we do have regulation here. There are actually probably 10 or 15 other countries that have a freer economic system than ours. We do have controls, but we are geared that way. All right, I think we about beat this thing to death. And here's an example of a question on this, on the 2012 exam. I do this a lot. Let me see here. And it looks to me like the answer would be A. The key thing is centralized planning. Usually it's like the scarcity question. It's one or two questions on the exam. I do have to cover it, but if you remember from my lecture yesterday, I told you there are 3 essays on the AP exam. Pretty much number 1, we know what it's going to be like, generally speaking. 2 and 3 can be anything. They can take any minor topic and turn it into a full-blown essay question. And so what I have to do is I have to cover all these, quote, minor topics. Scarcity is a major issue in economics, but it's usually one multiple choice question. Economic systems is usually one multiple choice question, yet I've spent, 15 minutes on it here because it could be a full-blown essay. Anyway, I know this was a lot. I not only want to prepare you for this AP exam, I want to, have you prepared for life in politics and to know the differences between these systems. I want to finish out with the word socialism is used a lot here in the United States, but people using the term democratic socialism, they're not socialists like this. In my AP European history class, usually the word socialism, when it was originally first started to be used, referred to people who were trying to help the poor. Okay? And then Karl Marx came along, and he wrote his book, The Communist Manifesto, and there were countries that tried to adopt his principles. And so I have a lot of friends who call themselves socialists, and they'll say, well, yes, we believe in this, but not Marx's way. And, so I'm putting this in there for them. So because of the history of the Cold War, especially someone my age, and someone with a degree in history, we tend to focus on those countries. When there's countries like Norway, again is the best example, that have capitalism and socialism mixed together pretty heavily, and they seem to really like it, the Scandinavian countries. Anyway, I think that's about enough of this. I apologize if I bored you with this, but hopefully I raised your knowledge of the topic.